My name is Cynthia Roberts, and I'm the Dean of the School of Business at Indiana University Northwest. I'm also a graduate of LNI 34, and I've served as a board member of the South Shore Leadership Center in the past. I'm also on the board of the Northwest Indiana Small Business Development Center and the newly formed Northwest Indiana Influential Women's Association. This is my 18th year in higher ed, and prior to that, I spent 17 years in healthcare as a technical specialist, a manager, and an educator. My main teaching and research interest is in leadership and leadership development. And this mainly came out of my own experience. I experienced firsthand the challenges that you have when you're promoted to a management position after serving in a very technical role. All of my training was in the technical aspects of my job, and it was very black and white. And it did little, though, to prepare me for the leadership, educational, and/or human relations side of the spectrum, which is much more nuanced with a lot of shades of gray. I'd like to talk a little bit today about leadership theory and development because I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to practice leadership in addition to teaching leadership and helping to develop leadership capabilities in others. And just to say this up front, developing as a leader is a journey, and we're always a work in progress. We never really arrive. So, how has our understanding of leadership changed over time? Originally, leaders were considered large and in charge like heroes, and you might have heard the term great man theories. They were the best, the brightest, typically male, and expected to have all of the answers for everyone. Many studies have also been done around certain traits that leaders have, and you might have heard the term trait theories. And there's always been some consistency around certain traits and things like integrity, intelligence, confidence, and certain aspects of your personality like extroversion and conscientiousness. Over time, we learn that in addition to certain traits, maybe we also need to consider behavior and pay attention to our followers and even the situation at hand or the context. You may need to approach situations differently based on the skill of your followers, the complexity and/or the urgency of the situation. As our world continues to get more complicated and information, as well as fake information, is immediately available, we find that no one is really able to manage all of that by themselves. Now we think about concepts such as shared leadership or incomplete leadership, where many collaborate to get something accomplished. When we talk about leadership development, I consider three important aspects, and that's the knowing, the doing, and the being, or you can consider it as the mind, the body, and the soul. Learning about leadership is important because the literature can tell us what behaviors will be effective and what might not work so well. We also have to learn about ourselves and develop awareness about who we are and where our strengths and blind spots lie. Leadership development is also about doing. It's a contact sport, right? You have to go out and practice, but not just practice, you also have to reflect on that practice and continue to try different approaches if something doesn't go so well. There's also a component about taking care of yourself, right? Managing your stress and staying in shape. So that's kind of the body piece. Leadership is hard, and taking care of yourself allows you to meet the challenges with all of your resources. The third piece is actually being. This is sort of the soul or spiritual piece, and not necessarily religion, but finding out what your core values are and living authentically within those values. And that's kind of what we call integrity, thinking about how I want to be or show up in this world as a leader. So how does this process develop over time? Interestingly enough, when we first start out in that first position of leadership, many of us believe that we're not capable of being good leaders. So the first stage we have to go through is accepting that we can be. In many cases, particularly in women, our leadership capability in us is first recognized by somebody else. Then, once in that position, quite often what happens is we think that we have to be that hero or great person. So we fall into that trap and think we have to know everything and do everything by ourselves, which we quickly find is very stressful and draining and nearly impossible. Over time, we come to the realization that when we share power and involve others, you can do really great things. So we move in our head from a me perspective to a we perspective. So what I've outlined so far is the individual piece that we all have to work on. However, the collective piece is becoming more and more important today. Leadership is also enacted collectively, and you may have heard the term social capital, right? In most organizations, in order to create the change we would like to see, we really need others to help make that happen, especially others that have different perspectives, gifts, talents, and abilities. Even though involving others may make you frustrated and it takes a little longer because you have to work out the differences, I found that in the end you wind up with a better solution inevitably. I've learned something and our process is better. When I reflect on my own development as a leader, I believe that my own understanding and the way I approach things has followed the same path. First, thinking I had to do everything myself, but you know what happens? That became very draining and I got very resentful of all of the work that I had to do. So I learned that by empowering others, mentoring others, creating a great team, and developing my social capital within my unit as well as outside is much more effective and rewarding. A former colleague of mine once said that the sign of a good leader is that others can step in and take your place when necessary, and at first I didn't get it at all. But the more I thought about it, the more I found out that really is true. In a larger context, this is where the South Shore Leadership Center comes in. I think that the program does a great job at helping participants discover their own leadership capabilities as well as making connections with each other. You learn about bigger issues in our community that can only be addressed collectively because they're just too big and too complicated. The more we learn and know about something, the better we'll actually able to do something about it. So this program is actually helping to build the social capital of our region through the many connections that it creates. To bring it back down to the individual level, the connections can also help. We might learn of a new opportunity or develop a mentoring relationship with someone that can help us grow professionally. So I firmly believe that leadership is not a solo endeavor but a team sport. And for me, what about the future? Well, this may seem a little counterintuitive, but to this point, I've never really done a lot of advanced planning on a personal level. I had no idea I was ever going to be dean someday. I followed my interests and put my heart and soul into whatever position I had. When I was ready for a change, opportunities just seemed to appear. I never intended to be dean, but when the opportunity presented itself, I was open to it. Every step along my career resulted from having an interest in something and going for it. Professional and social connections also help facilitate that process a lot. What's next? I'm finishing up my second year here at IUN and I'm delighted to be here. I see lots of opportunities for how our school can help develop the surrounding region and have been working to create more connections between our faculty, students, and our community at large. I'm optimistic that we can make a difference. And after that, who knows? I've always had a great interest in our environment, love the whole Dunes area, and would love to have the time to get more involved in some of the activism around that. I'll just have to see what opportunities present themselves over time. I really have appreciated the opportunity to share my story, and as I mentioned earlier, there's still more to come. I think that participating in the South Shore Leadership Center programming is a wonderful way to learn about yourself, the issues we struggle with in our area and our region, stretch a little bit, and create connections and opportunities for the future. Thank you.